Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back. It's Thursday. And I did say I was going to do Thursday content. You know that, right? Well, you got a bonus on Monday, so hooray! It was Veterans Day. Thought I'd do a little extra bonus content for you guys and talk about some methods and cleaning restoration type of videos that we all kind of understand are, not as legitimate as we like to believe. Anyway, got a lot of good feedback on that video. Got a lot of decent comments, and I appreciate you guys. I really do. And for what it's worth, I'm really only doing this continually because of you guys. That's right. I am staying in the lantern content world because I have you guys around, and your comments and insight and contribute to you guys contribute to the channel, whether you know it or not. You do, because it's comments that really I like to see and react with and comment back, because we have a very tightly knit little community. Most content providers on YouTube are in the hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I'm definitely not that guy. There's just not enough interest for that to happen. But anyways, we're here, we have fun, and that's the main thing, right? I think so. But we're going to start talking about today's topic, which is evolution. That's right. Now, what I mean by that is what lanterns started out as and what they kind of slowly began to be. So, sit back, get something you like to drink or enjoy. And we'll get into it. So, we're burning a very special piece. And this is the earliest lantern in my collection currently. And this is the 1869 May 4 patented R.E. Dietz number O tubular. It's unmarked, has no identifying indication that it's R.E. Dietz except for the patents up there. And the globe is also patented. It's not a very strong casting, but it's there, and you can barely make it out. I have to hold it up to the sunlight to see it. It says patented May 4, 1869. So that would be the original globe to this piece. And it's a no-fill, which means it has no spout. So you have to disassemble the burner and the cone to fill it up. That's pretty early. A lot of early tubulars were like that, and I think the filler spout started to pop up around the late 70s. Mid to late 70s, maybe right around there. Anyways, that's it. And this is the only example I have like it. And I love it. I do. And this was purchased from Robert Emerson. So shout out to Robert Emerson. I appreciate this piece. He won it at auction for a very fair price, and he sold it to me for the price he paid, plus shipping, of course. And of course the buyer premium for the auction. But anyways, it was nothing compared to what this thing could potentially be worth. And I'm really grateful for that. So shout out to Mr. Emerson. I appreciate you, and thanks again for this beautiful piece, and I love it. You probably remember the video I made with it a while back last year, and it was painted red, and after doing a lot of deliberation and back and forth of do I strip or do I save it or whatever, I realized that the paint wasn't as old as we hoped, and it was a cheap rattle can job that just aged in a perfect environment, and I thought it would be good to strip it, and I'm glad I did, because there was rust underneath, and sure, the rust wasn't going to get worse exactly, but I like the way it came out. I do. And my pipe went out. Darn. Anyways, that being said, this, you can tell, is early because of the construction. So in the early days, they took metal and rolled it and soldered it. They soldered it on the inside here, and then they used these little pipe tubes, little joints. They made these little joints like it's plumbing. It really is essentially plumbing. And some of the earlier examples of this lantern had three-piece founts. So they had a fount deck, and then one piece of metal that was soldered on the side for the wall, and then a stamped skirt that had the bottom as well. So three pieces went into the fount on the earlier ones. Dennis Wheeler from Chicago and a few other makes did three-piece founts. By this era, Dietz was doing a two-piece fount. But anyway, this is pretty much the beginning. This is what R.E. Dietz, this would be technically the first model that R.E. Dietz rolled out, because prior to R.E. Dietz, it was Dietz and Smith. But we're not going to dive too deep into the history of those companies and what they became and whatnot, as we've done in the past. But this is just the great-great-grandfather of tubular lanterns. 1869 through the early 70s is when this one was made. And this is the beginning. Now, we all know that square tubes came in the 1890s, because this kind of overall construction was common through the 80s. 1890 square tubes come out, and that revolutionized the Dietz company, and there were imitators, and they paid the price. But anyways, fast forward to the 19-teens. Around 1900, Dietz did finally come to the cold blast lantern game. But in the 19-teens, they started introducing the squat globe lanterns. So not the tall stuff, but squat. So you had the Dietz top light, top lift D light, and then also the wizard, and then there was the number 2 wizard, and also then the little wizard. And so this one here, I've shown it on the channel before, but it's just the little wizard. And this is going to be our kind of comparison of evolution. And this guy is definitely 1913, so it has no crease in the tubes except for the 3 beads in the air tubes for rigidity. And this has got a rising cone. So this is definitely, 19-teens. And it's a great piece. I've never touched it. It's exactly how it came, and I just put oil in it, and it burns very nice. It does. It's a favorite piece. It really is. And even though it's a common lantern, the generation that it is not as common. So it's harder to find the earlier models of some of the most common lanterns that we're all used to. But that's kind of been one of my aims in collecting. Now, they made plenty of these, through the teens and 20s and 30s. And Dietz had they had the Monarch, had the Hilo, they had the Little Wizard, they had the D-Light, they had the Blizzard, and the Vesta, and they had a whole line of lanterns. They still were making the Dietz Victor, of all things. Still was a square tube. They had the Mill lantern, was a square tube. They had the Acme Inspector, that was still a square tube lantern. They still had the Dietz OK, which was still a square tube lantern, into the 1930s. And it wasn't until the 30s that they added a few other lanterns, like the Advance, which was a smooth tube D-Light. And then they had the Crown, which was a smooth tube D-Light with a larger fount. And then they had the Clipper, the Dietz Clipper, which was essentially a even more stripped down Dietz Hilo, but with a beautiful sailing ship embossed on the fount deck, which makes it more collectible. So you had some lanterns that came up around the Depression that were mainly reintroduced standard lanterns, but made of slightly lesser quality tin, and also no reinforcements in the air tubes. And don't forget the Gem, which was the cheaper version of this. So it was a little wizard with smooth tubes, and they called it the Gem, which was a name that was used by C.T. Ham. They acquired C.T. Ham in 1914, give or take. And they kind of used some of the names that C.T. Ham used on some of their lanterns prior to that. But during the Depression, 1931 through 33, they offered a few economy models. They were made a little cheaper so they could offer them to contractors and farmers for a little less money, so still retain some business during the deepest, darkest moments of the Great Depression. But by the late 1930s, you know what was happening throughout the country? Well, besides the Great Depression, Streamline, modern. Now, the Art Deco movement, or Streamline Modern as it's also known, it began at the Paris Exposition in 1926. And Art Modern, that was an architectural design that came out. It kind of revolutionized architecture. And it slowly became very popular in home appliances, lamps, home furnishings. And by the 1930s, early 30s, Art Deco really was hard to miss. A lot of things were acquiring a streamlined, modern type of aesthetic. And I have many Art Deco streamline pieces in my collection. That's loud. But they're not lanterns. No, I have, toasters and blenders and all sorts of different odds and ends. Radios, for instance. I collected radios for a while back in the 1990s. And they are all beautiful Art Deco streamlined modern radios. Now, they did offer some more traditional cabinet styles that were various popularity. I mean, they were designed for homes that were more stately, that had a continuous, early American or colonial style into the 1930s and 40s, and that was definitely a popular thing. A lot of people don't realize that even in the Art Deco streamline era, there was a lot of different styles of architecture. You had Spanish Revival, you had Egyptian Revival, you had, Beaux-Arts still was kind of popular in Rome and in Greece. You had a bunch of different things. Also, the Rococo era emerged, a renaissance in the 1930s. The French Revolution and all that stuff. So you had some pretty early, late 18th century revivals happening in the 1930s, even in the late 1920s as well. So there were so many different flavors flowing about that people associated, liked. They were like, well, that's nice. You had storybook and you had fantasy stuff, and you just had so many different aspects of different architectures that were common very early on. And people weren't all into Art Deco. People felt that was kind of a cold, sterile look sometimes. It was great for public buildings and public structures because it was kind of, it didn't really offend people, really. It just was very commercial. It became that way for sure. A lot of railroad depots became Art Deco, and it just got crazy. Office buildings and skyscrapers, all Art Deco. Art Deco, it's what it is. But beside that, kerosene lanterns were a utility thing. They were a tool, and a lot of people just kind of expected them to always look one way. Well, by 1936, R.E. Dietz decided that was going to change, and they introduced the Streamline lantern. That's right. Now, we've all seen these. This is a little wizard. Nothing really different or fancy or crazy. But this would be essentially a first-generation little wizard. This one's dated, I think, March of 1937. But this has got more curved lines, a nice fancy bell-shaped type of fount, and it's just streamlined. It's everything that the other previous generations have. This has, but they're smooth and contoured and a little more aerodynamic, if you will. This continued all the way to the 1950s. We see them all the time. A lot of antique stores, you will find streamlined lanterns more than not. And as I talk, I will interject. I will slip in some pictures so that you can see other streamlined lanterns that other companies made or offered, such as Embury, the Air Pilot series. They made a hot blast as well as the cold blast. And they made a number one and number two size cold blasts, and of course the number O style hot blast. They also still continue to make the number 210. And that was because they were very popular, and they kept being made for utility and contractors and stuff like that. But essentially, the 210 was a very streamlined lantern without the overly Art Deco aesthetic. They just had smooth tubes and very minimal design features. But Dietz, this was it. By 1940, all of their lanterns had the streamlined design, with some exceptions, of course. There were exceptions. Now, the streamlined lanterns that Dietz offered in 1936-37, the Monarch, Little Wizard, the D-Light, and the Blizzard. That's right. Those were the streamlined lanterns. Those were the new wave of tubular lantern construction. Now, of course, they continue to make. Well, they made the high-low, which never was streamlined. Never. It never received any kind of fancy streamlining. I think, well, the Victor was still being made in limited numbers by the early 40s, to my understanding. And they continued to make certain runs of standard lanterns without streamlining. You could still order it because they still had the tooling. So, but mostly by 1940, they were selling a lot more streamlined lanterns than not. In 1940 was the 100th anniversary of R.E. Dietz. 1840 to 1940 is the centennial. So I have one of those lanterns. I have one of the centennial Little Wizards. It's painted a gold color, and the fountain is a deep blue color. It's a pretty piece, and I've shared it before. But they offered that color scheme on their Little Wizard, D-Light, and Monarch. I don't think they offered the Blizzard in that scheme, but they had 3 lanterns that they offered for their centennial celebration in 1940. That's right. But going through antique stores, going to flea markets and whatnot, or estate sales, whatever, you go into someone's garage at an estate sale, and it's very, very possible you will find a Little Wizard, or even a number 100, which is a Little Wizard with a larger fount, 1950s era. And it will just be sitting there because somebody either stole it off a barricade or somebody bought it in the 1940s or 50s, and they just had it, because they made a lot of them. But it's funny, there's an Art Deco group on Facebook that I participate in once in a while, and everyone's posting all these beautiful Lalique glass sculptures and pottery and radios and sofas and other home furnishings, and of course cars. One of the biggest pieces of, machine age Art Deco Streamline Modern that I own is my car. It's the 40 Dodge. It's a Streamline machine. It is. And it's very Art Deco. I love it. I have a very soft spot for Art Deco design. I love it. I think it's elegant. But I posted one of these guys. I says, hey, you're not covering everything that's streamlined. Lanterns got streamlined, and people laughed and they thought I was crazy, but I'm like, no, here's how. So I showed them something like this compared to this. Well, not everybody got it, but that's okay because I know the details, and that's what matters. Just because not everybody understands, they look at something and they just like, well, it's the same thing. It's still a kerosene burning lantern. It's not modern at all. It should be electric. It should be modern and electric and blah, 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 blah. Well, fine. Battery-operated barricade flashers wouldn't come around until the 1950s, and where they actually had batteries that could last as long as they needed them to. But kerosene or oil-burning warning lamps were definitely still very popular and very much in need, because you could fill up a fountain, it would last 20 hours or more. And then by the time they made larger founts, it could last days. Like the square fount high-low could last almost 8 days on one fill. So that was definitely appealing. And that was longer than any battery could last. So that was still the thing. But Streamline Modern. Not everyone's a fan. Not everyone's a fan. Not everybody likes this look. I can't say that I'm the hugest fan of it, but I do like this, not because of the design as much, but because it's what I recognize and I associate with my earlier era of collecting or interests into tubular lanterns. So the very first tubular lanterns I ever saw were streamlined Little Wizards or D-Lights, and they were, of course, from the 50s, and they were painted Dietz blue, and they weren't really rare or exceptionally special, except for that I liked them. And I thought they were neat, and the warm light and all that, the whole element, the whole environment that they created, I fell in love with. And, well, I thought they looked neat. And I watched a lot of Little House on the Prairie when I was a kid, because my mom was a big, fan of Michael Landon. And so I would watch Little House on the Prairie, and of course, a lot of the lanterns on that show were streamlined, because they really didn't know any difference. And it's a kerosene lantern, and that's all that matters, and that's it. And we've talked about lanterns from Bonanza and other westerns, how they used just contemporary lanterns for their set because, well, it's an oil burning lantern. What's the difference, right? But anyways, streamline lanterns. It's the modern equivalent. This is what was popular design-wise through the last part of the Depression into World War II and into the mid-century. And, well, there's only one lantern that Dietz still manufactures in limited numbers, to my understanding, would be the number 8 Air Pilot. The number 8 Air Pilot came out after the acquisition of Embry in 1954, give or take. And so Dietz continued the name Air Pilot in honor of Embry. Well, it was essentially it was a little wizard with a different shaped globe, a little taller globe, kind of like a Vesta, but not exactly a Vesta. It's between a little wizard and a Vesta, but it has a slightly different chimney, a little taller stance. But yeah, the number 8. Many of you guys probably have a number 8 Air Pilot in your collection. I, however, do not yet, and I intend to find one, at least one that was made in New York before they went to Hong Kong. But the Streamline lantern, they destroyed all the tooling for them in the late 50s because they were tired. From 1936 all the way to 1956-7. After, well, it was probably 1959 or 60 when they destroyed the tooling for the Streamline lanterns. At least, to my understanding, it could be a little later than that because I know they still made the Monarch until the 1960s out of Syracuse. But a lot of the tooling for the Streamline lantern, the other models like the Blizzard and the D-Light and whatever, were ultimately scrapped. And they returned to making those models out of their traditional tooling from the 1910s and 20s. So there you go. So it had a long life. It had a long run from the mid to late 30s all the way to the late 50s, early 60s, and that was it. But still today, the Air Pilot is available from China, and it's the only Streamline lantern that retains this overall design to this day, which is pretty incredible if you think about it. I think so. But yeah, Art Deco. Who would have thought that an oil burning lantern would have received a Streamline treatment? And as you saw, the examples that I currently don't have of the Embry lanterns that I shared in the pictures there, they were also very Streamline modern. I think they were actually more Art Deco than the Dietz examples. I think so, at least for me they are. They have a lot of Art Deco qualities. Eventually I'll own one. I used to have a number 1 size Embry Air Pilot. It was cool. It was neat. I sold it, but eventually I'll find, I would like a number 2, a big one, with the original jade green paint. I think I would like that. I think that would be a nice piece to have for the collection, but eventually when the right one shows up, then I'll get it. Yeah, as I do. And we'll make a video about it too. All right? Well, anyhow, that's it for me. Got a little timeline, earliest to the latest, essentially. So there you go. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's good stuff. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I enjoy making these videos for you guys. And again, we'll see you a week from today, next Thursday. And we'll have something else to share, I'm sure. Take care. Have a great weekend and stay safe. Bye-bye now.